Today we are going to be showing you how to make Armenian Choreg. This is Easter bread that is one of my absolute favorites. It is soft, slightly sweet, and the perfect bread and the perfect pastry or dessert or even a little side to have with your coffee. For the recipe, you will need 6 eggs, 8 cups of flour. You might need a little bit more, so have more on standby. 2 cups of sugar, 1 cup of butter, 1/3 cup of oil, 1.5 cups of milk, 2 tablespoons yeast, 1 tablespoon mahleb, and sesame seeds for the topping. You want to start by activating your yeast, just adding warm water, not too hot to kill it, with the yeast and a teaspoon of sugar to really get that going. You're going to cover that. It doesn't have to be an airtight seal, just cover it with a plate and set that aside to let it rise. Now you want to add the milk to a pot and dissolve the sugar over medium heat. You don't want it too high to get it boiling, just hot enough to get everything dissolved and mixed well. You're also going to be adding the oil and the butter to that milk mixture. We forgot to add the butter at first, but we just added it later and constantly stirring just to get everything dissolved and mixed well. Here's a look at the yeast and how much it has risen in this time. Then you want to crack your eggs into a bowl. Make sure you get a large enough bowl because we had to transfer the eggs to a larger bowl, but it's fine. Just make sure it's large enough to combine everything, all the liquid and all the dry ingredients together. You want to really whip those up well to get them nice and fluffy and frothy. As you can see, we are transferring it to a larger bowl here. And then you can start adding your milk, sugar, butter, oil mixture while you are still mixing it. Once that is all blended together, you can go ahead and add the mahleb. You don't have to necessarily mix that, but again, we made it into a bigger bowl because we are going to be adding the flour and letting this rise overnight. So you definitely want something to hold everything and have enough room to mix it. We are adding the flour gradually, maybe 1 cup at a time, and at first just using a plastic spatula to mix it all together. Make sure you scrape down the sides and the base of the bowl. You don't want to overwork it, and just keep making sure that flour is getting mixed in well, like I said, gradually and slowly. Eventually you may need to use a hand or a stand mixer. We have the dough whisks attached to our hand mixer, and we just continue to whip it. And we also added the yeast mixture, so make sure you add that once your dough is really starting to come together. And again, remember to scrape down the sides, and you can see how much thicker it is already. So this is how the dough looks after adding 7 cups of flour. We know the recipe called for 8. Depending on a number of factors, you may need 1 cup, 2 cups, 3 cups more, and again, it all varies on everything to do with baking. You can never really judge it, but we did start to add a little bit more. You can see the dough is still a little bit moist. You just want to make sure that it's not dry, but it's not sticky, and it really forms together into a large dough ball. And like you see my mom doing, she is just folding in the flour, and you can slowly add some more when you can kind of judge how it's going to turn out. And just make sure all the sides are being scraped down and that flour is really getting incorporated and mixed into the remaining dough. And by now you can see how it is not sticking anymore, or at least not as sticky, and just folding it over itself every few times to really get everything kneaded well. And adding just a little bit of flour to get the last bit of stickiness, and when you punch it down, it should slowly rise back up, and it's starting to incorporate very well and getting much closer to its resting period. After our last few folds and kneads and small punches, you are going to bless your dough and put a cross in it by your hand. You'll see that in just a moment. My mom will be blessing the dough before letting it rise and proof overnight. You want to make sure your dough isn't in a cold area or is catching a draft. So we are using a large beach towel to fold our container in, and we sealed it as well. Just make sure every little nook and cranny and crevice is completely covered, and find a corner in your kitchen to go ahead and keep it overnight. And this is how the dough looked the next morning. It had already risen overnight and actually spilled over onto the counter. My dad luckily wakes up super early and he was able to put all the dough back in, and this was the second time it had risen. And when my mom is going to fold it and knead it one more time before taking the dough out and forming it into the Choreg shapes. We're going to be making 2 or 3 different shapes. You can really do any kind of shape you want, but the few that we are going to show today are the more traditional and favorite shapes. You can also make them as large or as small as you want. Personally, I like having the largest size you can get out of them, and I feel like when you bake them, those tend to be the more dense and fluffy and soft type versus the smaller ones. They don't really dry out, but they kind of turn more into cookies, and I definitely like the larger ones more. Just remember to keep a small amount of flour on your surface to constantly put some on the dough and on your hands to prevent any sticking and to allow the dough to roll out nicely. Again, you want to be gentle. You don't need to roll it out too hard. Just roll it out into these thin strands, and you'll be able to fold it kind of like a pretzel or braid it into the larger ones, as you'll see in just a moment. Before baking, you want to whip up an egg and milk wash to brush the top of them. You don't want to put too much, you just want to get that nice golden brown color, and of course to let the sesame seeds stick better. And just pouring just a little bit of milk, maybe 1/3 of a cup should do it. But again, depending how many eggs you have and how much wash you actually need, just lightly brush all of the breads that you are making. And then go ahead and sprinkle the sesame seeds on all of them. You can kind of do this any way you want, not too much, but as you can see, we're putting a decent amount, and you definitely want to have enough for every bite of the Choreg to have sesame seeds coming out in that flavor also. You're going to bake these at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 20 to 25 minutes, or until they are golden brown. You can see them already baking in the oven. And once they come out, they'll have a beautiful golden color or brownish color on the top, and the edges will still be kind of white. These are perfect for me. You may bake them more, bake them a little bit less. You can experiment with it, but really this is the ideal amount of time. and then they are ready to eat. You can definitely eat them hot right out of the oven, just don't burn your mouth. Typically I'll pop them into the microwave for a few seconds to get them hot and light and airy again. And there is a look at the bottom, how golden brown they look. You can see how nice and dense they are, but not too much. They have a nice chew to them, beautiful glistening color, and they are absolutely delicious. You can eat 10 of these in one sitting and you'll love it even more with each bite.